Welcome to the mini lecture on syntax. This is the video that you should be watching prior to completing your questions on Jamaica Kincaid's short story titled Girl. You have this document on syntax uploaded in Google Classroom already, and you can look through it. You can read it at your own pace. But I did want to go through this document briefly and discuss the different points in it to make sure that you understand what these different terms are referring to. So first off, the syntax. This is the arrangement or the ordering, grouping, or placement of words within a sentence. Essentially, it's just the way that your sentence is arranged. Syntax is the study of the way that sequences of words are ordered into phrases, clauses, and sentences. And that's the definition coming straight from this document. One of the most basic ways that we see syntax in the English language is through the different types of sentences. We have declarative sentences, imperative, interrogative, and exclamatory sentences. And ever since you were in grade school, you've probably been learning about these four types of sentences. I do want to do a quick review of these four types of sentences just so that as you go into this discussion of syntax, they are fresh on your mind. First off, a declarative sentence. This is a sentence that's going to make a statement. An example is, I would like to go to Atlanta. This is a simple statement saying what you would like to do. An imperative sentence is going to give a command where you tell someone to do something. An example would be this. Take me to Atlanta. That's making a command, telling someone to do something. An interrogative sentence is going to ask a question. So, will you take me to Atlanta? Ask a question. And finally, exclamatory is going to express strong emotion. Please, please, please take me to Atlanta to see the Braves play. This would be an example of a sentence with strong emotion. So knowing these basic types of sentences is going to help you as you go through syntax in Jamaica Kincaid's Girl. You want to consider how different types of sentences have different impacts on you as a reader. Next, we want to look at simple sentences, compound complex sentences, and complex sentences. You can read through the definitions, but just remember that simple sentences are going to typically be your shortest sentences with only one independent clause that can stand by itself. Compound sentences, they have two independent clauses and they're joined by a coordinating conjunction or by a semicolon. And remember, those coordinating conjunctions are your fanboys. For, and, nor, but, and so on. A complex sentence has an independent clause that can stand by itself along with a dependent clause or subordinate clause that cannot stand by itself. And then a compound complex sentence is going to have two independent clauses that can stand by themselves, but one of those independent clauses is going to have a subordinate clause or a dependent clause tacked on to the end. Next, getting into some vocabulary that you may or may not be familiar with. A loose or cumulative sentence is going to be a sentence that has its main clause at the beginning of the sentence. Notice this example right here. We arrived at Odeum at 11:30. That's the main part of the sentence. However, following up the main part of the sentence is a dependent clause at the end of a beautiful ride of about 17 miles in a very, that's a typo in this document, in a very fine and pleasant day is what it should say. Notice that we could mark out everything after the word at, and the sentence would still make sense. However, this information does add to the sentence and help it be more complete and make more sense. So this is called a cumulative or a loose sentence. Next, a periodic sentence is a sentence that is organized into two parts where a complex thought is not fully complete and fully explained until you read both parts. So technically, we do have a dependent clause at the beginning where it says, as we started to arrange the pieces on board. By that itself, that doesn't make sense. And then we have a dependent clause that says, I was startled by the sight of his crippled hand. This is a independent clause, and it could stand by itself, but both parts of the sentence make more sense when they are put together. So this is a periodic sentence. A convoluted sentence. This is a sentence that falls under the category of periodic sentence, but instead of having the subordinate clause to start with, you have the subordinate clause or the dependent clause splitting the sentence in half. This sentence right here could read, white men know this, and that would be a complete sentence. But we have a subordinate clause plopped right there in the middle at the bottom of their hearts, and this breaks up the sentence. So altogether it reads, white men at the bottom of their hearts know this. And our second example is, now demons, where whatever else they may be, are full of interest. Again, we have that subordinate clause or our dependent clause plopped in the middle of our complete sentence, breaking it up. And this is called a convoluted sentence. Next, we have balanced sentences, and this is when two or more words or constructions within your sentence have the same form and length. Notice that this sentence is joined with a semicolon, and the first part of the sentence nearly matches the length of the second part of the sentence. Visit either you like. They're both mad. Both parts are nearly the same length. In the second example where it says, the road lay white in the sun and the railway ran just behind, this is another example of a balanced sentence because not only do we have two subjects that both start with an R and have the word the preceding them, but we also have a verb, lay and ran, and then a location, in the sun and just beyond. So both sides of this sentence are nearly balanced. Parallelism is another term that's important to know, and it has a lot to do with balance. Also, this is when the different parts of your sentence have the same grammatical format and also the same grammatical relationship when you're discussing the same thing. I know that kind of sounds like a mouthful, but an example here to help it make sense is, the Department of Justice began a vigorous campaign to break up the corporate empires and to restore the free and open market, and to plant the feet of industry firmly on the road to competition. So right here we have to break up, to restore, and to plant the feet. This to, this is how we have parallelism, because each part of the sentence is parallel. It might be helpful to think about parallel lines, like you learn about in math class. Those lines that line up and are exactly even with each other. In this way, the parts of the sentence are even with one another. Inverted word order is when you have the main elements of a sentence in a different order rather than what would be natural. An example here is, him nature solicits with all her placid, all her monetary picture. Him the past instructs, and him the future invites. And this sentence might sound really weird because usually we would say nature solicits him with all her placid, all her monetary picture. And the past instructs him, and the future invites him. But by changing the word order up here, it has more of an emphasis on him rather than the action that these different items like nature, the past, and the future are doing. So this is just another way we can use syntax in our writing and in the literature that we read. Juxtaposition is when you have two ideas, words, or phrases that are not usually associated with one another, and they're put next to one another. And they're put next to one another. An example of this would be, say that you're listening to a song that has music that sounds like a lullaby. However, the lyrics are actually saying something very dark and very sinister. If you pair beautiful lullaby music with dark, sinister lyrics, that doesn't make a lot of sense because we think about lullabies being appropriate for children, and we think about dark, sinister lyrics being more appropriate for older people who are able to handle horror. And by putting those two things next to each other, there's a very surprising effect on listeners. Rhetorical question, this is one that you're probably already familiar with. This is a question that is asked that doesn't require an answer. Repetition is when you have the same sounds or ideas or words repeated throughout a text. I will let you read through these examples of repetition yourself. polysyndeton and asyndeton, these are examples where, excuse me, I'm sorry, there are some announcements coming over the speaker and I don't want you to not be able to hear me. Again, polysyndeton is when you have a sentence with a list of items, and usually you would put a comma after each item in the list, but instead you use a conjunction. So the example here reads, "It is the season of suicide and divorce and prickly dread." Usually you would have a comma after each item in the list, but instead you would use "and" to connect each item in the list. Similarly, asyndeton breaks the usual pattern as well, and it moves your passage along quickly without using those usual conjunctions. An example here, his care, his food, his shelter, his education, all of these were byproducts of the parent's position. Instead of having the word "and," there is just comma, so we totally skip over the conjunction. The rest of this document I'll let you read over yourself. These are the big ones I wanted to hit on, though. If you have questions about anything in relation to syntax, please do not hesitate to come to study hall or come see me before or after school, and I'm happy to discuss with you. But this is just a quick introduction to this handout. I wanted to go over it verbally because I recognize that this is something that may feel a little bit new to you and that you might have questions on. So again, let me know if there's anything you need from me in regards to syntax. I'll be here. Good luck as you begin your Jamaica Kincaid assignment.